For this episode, Gunther Bonnard asks, how do we model a business glossary? Who are the actors? How do we run a workshop? How do we get consensus on definitions? Where do we start? Which business areas? And how do we visually store in a simple way? Well, the first place that we want to start with glossaries is to find existing glossaries. Look up industry standards, look up industry specifications, and use those at least as a base that you can then start to talk with people about how it's going to vary from there. What's specific to our organisation and how do we anchor it back to industry standards or other standards? To find who the actors would be, we would use the capability model, such as we talked about in the previous two episodes. The capability model is straight away telling us the kinds of people that we're looking for and the kinds of information and definitions that they're likely to work on. So use that capability model and ask around for who's got the phone numbers or the directories. People who've already marked up their own version of that are likely to have information about who we can talk with. The next thing we want to do is to have a workshop which is about context-specific variances. So we don't need to start from scratch. We start from the existing glossaries and then ask people what the variances are, what the local acronyms are, that you then find that you've got 15 different meanings for the same nominal acronym that are scattered all over the organisation, which means you're going to need a thesaurus, sounds like, thesaurus, is the same as, is different from, is an extension of, is a subunit of, is an aggregation of. These are standard thesaurus terms. Dublin Core is one of the standards that we might use to map out how these terms relate with each other. And the first point here is that we are never going to get actual consensus. What we need to do is to map out local meanings and build a consensus locally, often at the time, but have something, use the thesaurus and the glossary as an anchor for conversations. Now, how to publish it, how to make it visually accessible. What we did in Telstra, a large Australian telecom, was we had what we called a jargon-buster. It was up in the top right-hand corner of the screen. And you could type in anything. These days you would probably use voice interface to look at anything. But you need a continual update for this, someone who acts as a moderator. You can't just do it once. It's not a project, it's a continuous process. But what happened was that if you typed up a term, it would produce what was effectively a wiki page of all of the matches, the suggested meanings, but also warn you of other variances by looking up not just the glossary but the thesaurus, could warn of other things that might sound like it. Like, I remember an absolute doozy was where we found that ISO, which most people think of as International Standards Organization, in one area ISO was a standard acronym for Internal Service Order. So we knew we had to be careful in that space as to what terms we used. But now we had the glossary, the list of definitions, and the thesaurus, the relationship and clashes between the different definitions, it became possible to make sense. And then people maintained it themselves, working through a moderator. So you have the glossary itself, you have the actors, you've got the means for maintaining it. You accept that you will never actually get consensus. What you do is accept differences and work with them. How to start that is by working and mapping to the capability model, and we store it with something or access it by something like a jargon-buster. Straightforward how to model a business glossary, and more to the point, how to use a business glossary in any organisational context.